Right.
Great, and welcome to the TADSummit podcast. We have the TADSummit Innovators, and I'm really pleased to have Matthew Smith. Sorry, garble that one. Let me do it again. Okay, be quiet. Okay, welcome to the TADSummit Innovators section. We have Matthew Smith from fieldcloud. He really brings a wealth of experience from industrial applications. So we're going to have some really quite interesting conversations. So Matthew, welcome.
Thank you very much, Alan.
And great. John. So we are just going to kick off with, could you just quickly introduce yourself and then explain what fieldcloud gets up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. So my name's Matthew Smith. I'm based in a little city called Grenoble in the southeast of France in the French Alps, which is France's Silicon Valley and also the birthplace of hydroelectricity. So there's an interesting intersection between energy, renewable energy, and semiconductors and all things electronics. So that makes it quite an interesting place. I'm originally from South Africa. I started my career in a public power utility, working on metering and telecontrol systems. That's how I kind of got into the telecom and IT space. And spent middle part of my career working in oil field services. And 14 years ago, I founded fieldcloud, and we provide solutions and we build basically digitization for heavy industry, oil and gas, petrochemicals, and refining mostly. And we work at the intersection of enterprise IT, SCADA, process control and automation, and telecommunications. But just as a full disclaimer, I've never worked for a telco. However, since the very beginning of my career, I've always been a user of telecommunication services, and I've been procuring various types of telecom services over a 30+ year career. Okay.
Great. That's an excellent introduction. And the reason you're here, I guess, well, A, to have fun, but also to help raise awareness, because the first time we met actually was at TADSummit in Paris earlier a couple of months ago. And then as I got to understand your business, I was like, wow, this is important. You've got great insights around the importance of programmable comms, the shift we're seeing in IoT, and all from an industrial IoT perspective. So that's why I was keen to get you on, because of the unique insights. So maybe you could give a little bit more background around, what are some of the hot projects you're working on in fieldcloud at the moment?
Right. So we've got a couple of different hot projects that have been actually in motion. One of them in particular is now going into its 5th year, which is really cool. So what we like doing is we like building long-term relationships with our clients. Mm-hmm. And we work with a rather large company in the chemical and petrochemical space.
Yep.
And they really provide an interesting set of services into the refining industry, mm-hmm. where they deliver a chemical product, but they deliver it by managing a very special chemical reaction at the end of a plant turnaround, so a big plant shutdown. Oh, and when you need to start up the mm-hmm. refinery unit, you actually need to do some things which involves a chemical reaction.
Gotcha.
And until this client was introduced to us at fieldcloud, they were doing things the old-fashioned way with a pen and paper and a notebook. So they'd take their gear on the road, they'd take it to oil refineries all over Europe. In fact, they deliver service on 3 continents, and we've helped them digitize this process in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, and in the and in North America so far. And the old way of working, they take equipment with some measuring, instruments, send field crew, so field technicians, and the field technicians would effectively run this, whole chemical reaction, mm-hmm. and every hour they'd be sitting down writing notes in a book, basically observing what was happening.
Yep.
And at the end of the job, these notes would be given to a secretary, and the secretary would type them into Excel, and someone would produce a very pretty PDF report, which is the deliverable to the customer.
Yeah.
Like, look, you know what? We can do a hell of a lot better than that, right? It's like, this reminds me of an old way of working that I saw in the oil and gas industry. So for drilling and for various other services that happen offshore, that was the way of working in the 1980s and even into the sort of late 1990s, depending on who you were, right? But I did have the good fortitude for working for a very large, the leading oil field services company. And I think why I really enjoyed my career, my middle part of my career there, is that we were building digitally enabled services right from the get-go. Either using, satellite communication or using other types of telecom infrastructure. But telecom was a very key part of the overall digital experience. And that's carried through. And so what we do at fieldcloud is we literally kind of get this intersection right. And this intersection of IT, of SCADA process control, and of telecom, right, again, manifests itself in our clients in improving operations where people, plant, and process are involved. And you need to digitize all three. So you have to provide people with tools for communication and interacting with data, right? You've got plant, so that's your equipment. So this could be the actual boiler, reactor, compressor, and there's instrumentation that, again, measures or controls things in that equipment. That's your plant. And then your process is like how the people in the plant actually work together to produce an output or an outcome. Okay. And if you're not mindful of that, it's going to be very hard to actually deliver value. Or to have something useful, right? So again, that's what we do. And we also like to, again, call out the kinds of BS that exists in the market, right? Because there's a lot of hype. I mean, look, the reason why I love you guys in TADSummit is that you are a no BS organization, and your thought leadership really deals with a lot of the nonsense that gets like kind of hawked around, or
BS is dangerous. BS is dangerous, and I think we were talking about kind of beforehand. I mean, just some of the BS. I look at some of your customers here. It's like the who's who, including Orange. I like to note to everybody out there. So we were talking beforehand on some of the BS with SMS and 5G, and really amazing to hear it from the perspective of such a stable and long time company that is really dealing in serious industrial avenues. I'm talking about oil, gas, chemicals. This is very serious stuff. And you brought up SMS, which is our favorite topic at TADSummit these days. And I think it'd be good for some of these people in the industry, especially some of these firewall companies that we're dealing with, and some of these telcos, to hear your perspective on the total BS there, and some of the risks. If you don't mind me shifting.
No, absolutely. And I mean, look, if we look at the sort of overall landscape, and we look at the kinds of risks as well as the law of unintended consequences, because I'm a big believer in this law of unintended consequences. Sometimes we are evaluating risk with incomplete knowledge and incomplete information, okay? And by mitigating one risk in one place, we introduce risk elsewhere. And it can be quite complicated to actually work through this and identify. But I think we all know, right, that no matter what technology solution you put in place, there's always going to be a way of working around the technology and the technical countermeasures. We can see this when it comes to fraud with certain applications that are online where SMS is used as a factor for authentication. So this whole thing of SIM swap fraud is a great example in the telco space, right? And again, the way in which you look at countermeasures for that, if you have a vested interest in keeping SMS alive, which some folks do in the industry, you're obviously going to want to steer those countermeasures in a certain way. And that long-term is going to be unhealthy because it creates a dependency. Another example, which we've seen, particularly in emerging markets, is the clinging on to USSD. Okay, and Alan, you and I were having a great laugh at the end of TADSummit because I was on my high horse talking about USSD must die. I had a great conversation with the head of the GSMA for Africa, right? So the person who heads up GSMA's interests and coordinates all the members across the entire African continent. And unfortunately, in some markets, in particular, most African markets, there's this dependency on USSD because the argument is, yeah, but you know what? People can't afford, a smartphone, right? So they're kind of stuck using a candy bar with basically a numeric keypad, and they'll have to kind of type things in, a character at a time. Very old school. And during TADSummit, you had a great presentation of someone showing a USSD interface to ChatGPT for some pilot project in Nigeria. Just like, okay, cool, all right, but I mean, this is like kind of all right. Give me a big enough hammer and everything's going to look like a nail, right? But you've got to go back, and it's not just about the big hammer. It's about what are the vested interests behind that, right? Why is it necessary for someone to cling on to old technology, right? Is another great example in the machine-to-machine space or the IoT space is this whole issue of the GSM network sunset, right? Or sunset of legacy generations of the mobile network, right? And the big one is payment terminals. So payment terminals, right? Where there's a lot of payment terminals out there that are still using circuit switch dial-up. Okay. For their data communication. They're not using packet data. And the chipsets, the modems inside the actual payment terminals are legacy. So, it's another thing that we do is we'll actually sit down and kind of do a 360-degree sort of like unpacking of all of this. And as I was saying to you guys before we started the recording, one of the things that we really emphasize is that we are the guardian of institutional memory. Okay. And so being the guardian of institutional memory is really important because as companies get merged, get acquired, get divested, they morph, their culture, right, shifts. And some of the people that defined the original culture go, they're no longer involved. And the reasons why certain decisions were made, why certain choices were expressed, and the principles behind why we do things as an end user customer, right, get lost in the mists of time. Okay. And I often get, criticized that, we're a small company, we're not big at all. But we've outlasted, okay, some of our customers' organizations in terms of people, all right? And we can go back and we can be that guardian of institutional memory. And I think it's really important.
Well, there's two companies that needed you more than air. And those two companies are Cinch and Infobip. So Cinch bought a company called Intelligent, a legacy telco in the US. Infobip bought a legacy telco in the US called Peerless Networks, right? So they all wanted to come into America and be like Twilio. And they made, Intelligent's a very profitable company, did real well. Peerless did the same. Now what do they have? Now they have cease and desist from FCC on robocall issues that they don't even understand. So you've got these two, companies with founders, tech founders, and they're both got unicorns, and they're like, hey, let's go buy this thing in the US. Meanwhile, they pay $1 billion, a few $100 million for the one asset, and they don't have any of this institutional knowledge. Now they're all sitting there going, "Wait a minute, we didn't sign up for this. What do you mean lawsuit? What's the TCPA? And who was handling this stuff before?" So I think it's really critical. And look, there's a lot of stuff going on in our industry right now in telecom with consolidation, and now really the demise of a lot of companies that are going to get split off. But there's so much critical infrastructure involved that, you know, some of the services that you're providing, really people need to reach out and understand how they can, you know, find somebody like you. Because it's not like somebody you can find in a phone book. Like, hey, let's call the guardian of institutional knowledge. What are we going to do? Like, where do we find you? You know what I mean? We call Ghostbusters. Like, you know what I mean? So I think it's great that you came on the show and that you're part of TADSummit. And I think it's great that, you know, we got to put a piece together around this, Alan.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can kind of do a write-up, because we're not going to be able to capture the brilliance and uniqueness of what they're doing. Because look, everybody's going digital. The whole world is being digitized.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously your company has put in the time and years and the pain and the knowledge in the most critical aspects of it, which are, you know, oil, gas, refineries, chemicals, really serious stuff. So this is really exciting for me. And I could sit here for a week with you. But I think we got to make him like the permanent expert on what that term even means, Alan, and why a company, why a company like his, like FireCloud, is so important for everybody to pay attention to and understand. And then we can get into the nonsense about 5G doesn't work and all the other stuff and that type of stuff, my friend. But wow, what a diamond in the rough you found with this guy, Alan. And thank you for showing up at TADSummit in France, because I like to say I've joined a few months ago too with Alan, and now we are causing, which is telling the truth everywhere. And you know what? At the end of the day, that's why to me TADSummit is the most important organization in telecom. We're like nobody else. We have innovative companies. You're one of our innovative companies. We got a innovative company that became a unicorn, Uniphonic. We've got Webio that just got $1 billion contract. We have there's the coolest companies in the world are right at TADSummit, TADHack. And man, this has been great for me. And I'll let you guys geek out, but we really need some more data and info out of you and some type of a piece. So these people that, you know, they want to be part of the Silicon Valley in the US. You come from Silicon Valley in France. There's a disconnect between digitation, security,
yes,
and what's reality. And you know, the more you lie that everything's under the rug eventually gets lifted up. So I'll let you continue.
It certainly does. It certainly does get lifted up the rug, and I'll
sometimes
just,
by the wrong people.
You bet. Another point I just wanted to sort of bring, which is the sort of like the extreme sort of consequence of loss of institutional memory, number one, and number two, also when things kind of get, you know, the rug gets lifted up as well, right? Because this is everything in its naked, bare ugliness. But what tends to happen when you lose enough institutional memory is you end up becoming a cargo cult. So if you think about all these folks, you know, in the Pacific Islands, right, who saw the American GIs come and go and staging their logistics and bringing planes in and unloading cargo and loading up cargo, doing drills, doing, you know, all the things that you do when you do military staging, right? Without understanding why and what it's really all about, okay? And we see this, so cargo cults, and we even have a term in software called cargo cult programming. It's an anti-pattern. So cargo cult programming is basically where you are following the rituals that some wise, gray-bearded, you know, elder, right, put in place without knowing at all why they were, you know, done that way, what the reasons were, and whether they're even still appropriate, okay? So again, if I'm on a mission for one thing, right, it's to, again, enlighten dysfunctional organizations that are in the thick of cargo cult behavior, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going through the motions and they're basically buying things, they're integrating things, they're connecting things, they're operating their business in a way that is like a cargo cult.
Yeah.
Because they haven't actually taken a step back to say, why the hell are we still doing it this way, right?
Exactly.
And it's even worse when the reason why is because someone lied in marketing.
No, not those guys.
I
Don't say that.
They're not accountable, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Oh, I've not heard that one.
Programming. No, this is critical.
So
I mean,
just
look,
quickly, for the
entire,
sake of time, and just bringing it back to SMS, because I mean, you're a consumer of SMS, A2P SMS services for notifications, for security, and the rest.
No, I try my best not to do SMS and to get customers and get clients away from using freaking SMS. Okay, I can use harsh language here, but look, SMS, okay, really no longer has its place for most of the authentication and authorization duties that we have. So as the second factor, there are better ways of doing two-factor, multi-factor authentication. There are better ways of doing notification and paging today. You do not need to send an SMS to get someone's attention that your boiler is about to explode. Okay. Exactly. And trying to engineer that in, like, and here's an example which is closer to the telco space. So when a telco says, hey, Mr. Oil Refiner, right, we've got this magic private, 5G standalone bells and whistles, thing to replace your PMR, your Tetra radio walkie-talkies, okay? And they go out and say, well, yeah, and by the way, we've got this capability, so instead of doing this type of pager notification on Tetra, we'll do it using SMS. And the only reason why is because it entrenches someone that's going to yank royalty money, right? Because they've implemented code that's made its way into some vendor's package that makes its way into a solution that the telco sells. And you don't get to ask the reason why, and is this appropriate?
Exactly. That's a very good point. So we're coming up on time. We will definitely have you back because there's a lot of
absolutely.
Because I think there's been we're focused on the consumer side just because the problem is so massive. It impacts all consumers. But I think the industrial side and just some of the things you've brought in terms of cargo cult, the challenges of basically getting locked into a solution that was made around certain assumptions, and the problems in even trying to migrate from where an industrial process is today into some of the technologies that are getting pushed, whether it be 5G or the rest, creates further compromises that limit the organization's ability to change. So again, amazing insights. Definitely have you back. And again, Matthew, thanks so much for your time.
I want to say one more word. And look, if you take a look at Matthew's company and you put them across the slew of everything we have here at TADSummit, everybody out there needs to understand, we have the innovators. We have the most brilliant minds that can solve problems of the world, not the suits that keep passing it along in the marketing people. So Matthew, I'm so excited to finally meet you, and Alan has spoken about you, and really integrate you in going forward at TADSummit, and really the education of the world on, hey, enough of the bullshit. This is how it works.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Johnny.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny, and thank you, Alan, for the opportunity. It's been great. Last word.
Go for it.
I'm actually launching a new show, right? And I already teased this on LinkedIn, but it's called the Connected and Integrated Show, because that's the tagline in fieldcloud. Fieldcloud is about being connected and integrated, and it's about old and new coming together, and again, why some of the old stuff is still relevant and how to add the
Absolutely. And just send through the link for the show and I'll include it in the weblog, okay?
Yeah, and if you want me to come on there and get you banned, let me know.
And again, yeah, this is a reciprocal thing. So I'd like to invite both of you onto a forthcoming episode to talk about some old and new school telecom
Please.
concepts and how they relate, because there's a lot of young people out there, young engineers, guys who are doing electronics, they're doing networking, they're doing software, they're doing cloud, and they are missing some of the underlying principles. And us graybeard guys, we've been doing things the hard way when we got started.
Yeah.
And we understand some of the abstractions, but we also understand how to question those abstractions.
Yeah.
Are they still fit for purpose? Anyway, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks so much, guys.
Graybeard guys bring presents this time of year. So to my two Santa Claus friends, Merry Christmas.
Take care.